Welcome to this edition of the Million Dollar Mastermind podcast. This is where we pick the brains of high achievers from all walks of life and get their hard-earned, real-world insights on winning. I'm your host, Larry Weidel. What criteria did you use at age 37 without a lot of business experience, except from reporting and things like that? What criteria did you use to guide you to find, because obviously you found a real good spot to go in and to learn. You hate to go put yourself through and learn this, and then let's find out this is a dud industry or a dud company, So obviously you made some good choices there. What instincts were you following? How did you find the place you landed up at?
Okay, this is good advice for anybody. So I looked in lots of areas. I looked at what I was good at and stuff, but I reached out to 3 people who I looked at as mentors and said, what am I good at? Because I didn't know. One was in a marketing space, and I met with him, and he had a big international marketing firm, and I asked him to have coffee with me, and he sat there across from me. He goes, you don't know marketing. I wouldn't hire you. You could go be the front person for a carpet salesman or something, or like dog and pony show for somebody. I was like, okay, what? I don't want to do that. And then I met with another woman who was big in the women in business, and she ran the women in business. And I sat down with her and said, what am I good at? And she saw me very differently and told me what she thought I was good at. And then I also met with a friend who had this startup, and Google had just bought YouTube, a little bit of luck there, and he was looking for someone who understood video. And so I met with him, and I said, where would you use me? What skills do you need? So I sat down and looked at those 3, and then I did the thing that I always tell people to do. I followed the money. Where was the money going to be in the future? And it was healthcare and technology. And the money was going to be in healthcare and technology. And if I was going to make a big move and step away from I could have stayed on TV forever. They were happy with me here. If I was going to step away from a lucrative career that I'd spent 20 years building, I wanted to step into something that was bigger and more successful. So for me, that was what success looked like. I wanted more money, more opportunity for my family. So I said, where was the money? And I definitely healthcare and technology was where the money was. One of the jobs I looked at was also coaching attorneys to do, media coaching for attorneys at some of the big law firms. That wasn't as long of a path that I could see. And then I had the best thing happen to me. So I was going through that conversation. I really liked the guy that was starting the startup. I believed in his values. I believed in him as a person. I believed in the software he was building, even though I didn't really understand what software did or what software as a service was. I didn't really understand it all, but I believed in him as a person. And I went to a gala. This is a fun story. So I went to this gala, and I was all decked out as the news anchor, and I'm up in the front auctioning off some giclées. I was AMC. So I'm auctioning off some giclées and doing the things that you do when you're a news anchor in a small town. You do the big the heart balls and the big galas. And this is for the American Cancer Society. And a buddy of mine came up to me who I hadn't seen in a while. And he said, hey, I hear you're talking. This guy's name was Sean. I hear you're talking to Sean about working for him. And I said, yeah. Like, how did you know that? And he goes, well, I just wanted to tell you, and this guy's super successful. He said, I would work for him for free for the options. And I was like, oh, thanks. I nod my head. I didn't know what the hell an option was, Larry. I didn't know. I was a news anchor. And he said, I would work with him for the options. And I was like, yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. And then I had to go home and look up what an option was. And so then that gave me the opportunity to look and really look at what wealth could look like from that perspective. And so that's how I made that choice. I was like, wow, like some really thoughtful processes and a few bits of luck and people that came into my life to be able to figure out to go down that path. But truly, look at what you're good at, talk to the people around you, ask them what you're good at, and then keep your eyes open for opportunity.
That's funny what you said about options. I just listened to something from Charles Barkley yesterday, and he was telling a story. He said when he was signing with Nike, Michael Jordan called him, and he said, don't take the money. He said, you got a contract from basketball. You don't need money. He said, take a little bit of money and as many options as they'll give you. And Barkley was like, options? I never heard of options.
Right? Yeah. Well, and someone said to me, like, don't go for the paycheck, go for the long-term wealth. And I had to
Yeah.
really wrap my head around it. I hadn't thought about it. But then I will tell you, so when it came time for this company to go public, I became vice president of not just media, but marketing, communications, all of it, and ran that road show with the leadership team because I had skin in the game. They knew I would wake up in the middle of the night as worried as they were because I
Yeah.
had a lot of options. And
Skin in the game. Skin in the
right,
game.
lots of skin in the game. So when those long, ridiculous hours and splitting sleep to even stay up enough hours to make this happen, and the IPO roadshow and the whole thing, I mean, it was a
And
lot.
turns out for, just kind of a side thing, it's amazing how educational those IPO roadshows are, aren't they?
Yeah, and
Was that an eye opener for you? The questions you get asked and things like that?
what was really interesting is it's such a quiet process. You have to have a quiet period. So for those of us who'd never been through it, to find someone to ask questions about, what is this going to look like?
Yeah.
What do we do? Like no one knew. Now there's more out online and stuff, I think, than there was, but you're in literally what's called a quiet period. You're not allowed to talk about it. So it's hard to find someone to help guide you through that. And now
Right.
I've done that with other companies. Now that I've been out of this space for a little bit, I've worked as a consultant and helped some other people put their roadshow decks together. But they ask you and they're really quick and you're in and out. And the CEO does that talking. I did not. I just was
Yeah.
I was a support staff, but I
Yeah.
would travel and go. But prepping him and getting him ready and
Right.
treating it like it was journalism, like it doesn't matter what they ask you. Here are your 5 answers. Whatever they ask you, pivot, just like journalism prep. Whatever they ask you, this is what you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about the green pasture. We only have this much percentage, but look at what we could have. Like creating the story and the narrative was so important. But yeah, they ask you very difficult things. The first time we walked into a Goldman meeting, these young people in these ridiculously gorgeous suits, they were all beautiful people too. They were all in like their 20s and early 30s, this whole room full of people asking questions. And they were so smart and they asked the most difficult questions. And we walked out of that first one and looked at each other and went, oh my gosh, how many of these do we have? I mean,
Yeah.
it was difficult.
Yeah. Now, as you got in, what did you do right when you hit the company? Now you're in, and now your ignorance is front and center, and I got to get competent in something to make myself useful. And you get some respect and, to get some confidence and get your toehold on the mountain. What did you do right to
Um,
make progress in a short period of time there?
I've always been comfortable. Maybe it comes from being a journalist and being an athlete who is coachable. I'm very comfortable not being the smartest one in the room. I don't expect to be. I don't want to be. I want to learn from everybody around me. So I asked a lot of questions and I went in using my journalism skills because that's what I had to work with. So when the tech guys, the chief technology officer is talking, I would go, wait, explain that to me, like in layman's terms, just like I would in an interview. Like, I don't understand how that fits together or why we care about it. I would use words that I knew and I would ask what we would say were dumb questions. And he would explain it over and over. But then when it came time to explain it to the sales team or solutions engineers or somebody else, I had that language and I just became sort of the communications person. Like I could be the tech whisperer because I was not afraid to ask the questions. I think that was the not being the smartest one in the room and not afraid to ask questions was really, really good. Like the things that I did right. What I did wrong is I stayed in that role too long. I never really stepped into my power and spoke up in some meetings where I actually saw where things could improve, like 2 or 3 years down the road. If I could do it over, I would have stepped into my power a little more and spoken up when I saw things going south because I thought people were smarter than me. And I was like, oh, wait, I actually did understand that. And I should have said that. I did understand it well. So it was a mix. So
Or
that was it.
Or you could have asked a question that would
Right.
pointed it out,
Right.
And so the thing is, sometimes we get intimidated to ask questions that need to be asked, and there's just nobody else in the room to ask the question but us. And if we ask it, a lot of good things unfold.
Well, I had the advantage of being an Emmy award-winning news anchor, so I wasn't intimidated by a whole lot. I'd already had big success, so I didn't need to prove myself, I felt like. Now, don't get me wrong, I was very intimidated and had a lot of imposter syndrome and studied really hard. I read Crossing the Chasm and Inside the Tornado, like those 2 books, probably 10 times over. And I would just try to understand.
Talk about those. Talk about those.
Oh, there's some old school books on technology and how technology is accepted and early adopters and the bell curve and how you get your products for people to see them. in a new light and how you take advantage of early adopters and find those people who will believe in you and let you make mistakes. And then how once you hit a certain point, so many people pile in, competition comes in, and then there's this gorilla. You want to become the gorilla on the other side of the bell curve. And one person becomes a gorilla and everybody else's company dies. That's kind of how it works. So, but those books, I found books that became my Bible, and that was part of my journey too. I had to learn. So I did have a lot of imposter syndrome. I don't want you to think that I was very confident.
For those of you who are sick and tired of fooling around and are dead serious about wanting to move up fast, I've got something especially for you. I've combined the best insights from over 40 years in business and making $70 million in income and compressed them into a free webinar. That's right, it's a free resource. If you want to find out exactly what the concepts are that I use in coaching million-dollar earners, register now at WeidelOnWinning.com. You'll discover the 5-part framework used by so many to reach their financial, personal, and professional goals. You can find that link in this episode's show notes. Give us a few journalism skills that would be useful to us.
Oh goodness, there's a lot. Be more.
Or give us a book to read to get some.
Well, I think if there's one phrase that I always say, and I always said this to my children, and I have to remind myself of this too: be more interested than interesting. Always step in and be more interested than interesting. And I have a hard time with that because I have stories and I get really excited like you and I can talk, and I just interrupted you, and then I felt bad because I did it because I'm like, I should shut up. But yes.
Wait a minute. When did you interrupt me? I've been spending the whole time interrupting you. If you interrupted me, good for you.
I did just a minute ago because I wanted to get that part in. So I felt bad.
Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the big thing about journalism is ask good questions and always be interested, be curious. Yeah. I think the thing that I was old school journalism too. When I got out of school, it was fair, balanced, and accurate. So if one side was talking a lot, I wanted to know what the other side said. It was very different. That's
gone now.
Yeah, it's gone. That's one of I'm so glad I'm not in that business anymore. Let me tell you, I am very good. I watch all the time. Wait, and get this. You'll love this, Larry. I married the weatherman. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Very scandalous. Second marriage. Anyway, we will watch the news together and both be so glad we're not in that business anymore. He's an attorney now. Yeah.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Well, good for him. And so you reached the point in this thing. So I'm going to write a book. The one you did was that, basically you don't have to give up. It doesn't have to be the end of the line. And what particularly was on your mind at that point to where you said, I just need to say this?
I'd gotten.
You had bounced back. You had bounced back at this point,
Oh, yeah. I had bounced back and done TV, and I'd taken on a new career in technology and had huge success and was a leader in that community and in the software.
Second family, 3 kids.
Yeah. On top of my game. And financially, I went from debt to wealth really quick after the IPO. Everything, house paid for, car paid for, things like just a different world. And my father got Alzheimer's. And so I spent a lot of time with him, and I had so many questions, and I hadn't asked them for most of my life. We weren't particularly close. We became closer as adults. He was in the Navy when I grew up, and then I moved away from home. So we became closer as adults. And when he was having Alzheimer's and not there to tell me things, I thought, shoot, this could hit me next. What do I need to put out into the world? What do I need to tell my kids if I'm not around? And so that started the wheels turning. And then I looked at my life and I realized where I felt like I was adding the most value was certain moments in my job. And I think I read it in a book somewhere. They said, go back and take your last 30 to 60 day calendars, because we all have digital calendars now. And they said, print them out and then get some colors and circle the things that you liked with one color, circle the things you didn't enjoy another color, circle things that you felt like you were making a difference in one color. And I went back and did that exercise, and I looked at my calendars, and the pieces where I thought I was adding value and I enjoyed were mostly when people had scheduled a sync on my calendar. Like maybe they didn't even work for me or one of my departments, and they were like, hey, I hear you're great at getting people through tough times, and I'm having panic attacks because my wife's pregnant, and I've had panic attacks on the bridge, or I lost a spouse and I'm struggling, or times when a neighbor knocked on my door once and said, I stood there and he had 2 beers in his hands and tears running down his face. And he's like, Nina, I just got fired and I'm afraid to go home and tell my wife. I don't know what to do. And I was like, come on in. We walked through the house and sat on the end of the dock and we worked it out. I'm like, that's what I actually like that. And I'm saying and doing things that are helping, but I don't know exactly what it is that I'm saying and doing that's right. So
Uh-huh.
what if
Yeah.
I stepped away and did the homework, did the research like a journalist and found out what are the commonalities? What did I do right looking back at my life? And
Yeah.
what do other people who get through tough times do to not just survive? And you'll get this, Larry, like not just survive it, but thrive on the other side, like have even bigger success. How do they make sure they're stronger? So that's what I did. I did a research and I stepped away and quit my corporate job. Very scary to step away from that paycheck, let me tell you. But once again, did that and wrote the book and started this journey. And
So you walked away from business to write the book.
yeah, I wrote it while I was still there. I wrote it very early in the mornings, like 4 and 5 in the morning. I would set my alarm and get up and write. But I
Yeah.
wrote that first book while I was still working, but then really felt passionate about the work I was doing and then stepped away. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, how did your work with nonprofits just naturally evolve? Because it seems like once you open the door that you're willing to do that, the invitations will keep coming. And at some point, you just got to say no.
Sounds like you're speaking from experience there. Yeah. Once you start down that path, it was always part of my journey as a journalist, as a news anchor, with being a very public figure. I was approached very early to be a part, to donate my time, to help out with a cause as the face of the cause. And then as I became older and really had an understanding of how boards worked and the difference I could make, then I chose things that were near and dear to my heart. I was on the board at the South Carolina Aquarium for a while. It was something that I was passionate about, living near the ocean, and they do a lot on the environmental causes. It's not just a bunch of fish, some people say. But then I was also doing work with areas in which I felt like there was a need. So I did the Palmetto Project, which is filling the gaps and wherever other nonprofits are missing, like the overlap. And so I found places where I felt passionate about them and said yes. But you're correct. For a while, I said yes to too many, and I had too many things on my calendar, and I felt like I wasn't making a difference in any
Yeah.
way because I just was barely there.
And it's hard to back out of that. It's like getting
Right.
rid of it's like getting rid of a splinter. It's easy to go in, but hard to get out.
Right. And
And
so what I had done is same thing when my father had Alzheimer's. And then after he passed, I started with doing the Alzheimer's walks and the cycling across the state for Alzheimer's and different things. But then when he passed and I looked at this disease and I become more knowledgeable about it and the understanding that me in my late 50s, I'm likely next, I very openly got in touch with all of my boards and said, I will be backing off of these. I'm putting all my eggs in this basket and I'm going to be this is where I'm going to put my energy so I can actually make a difference.
yeah, let's face it, there's just no end to the causes. And they're all, or most of them, incredibly, you can make a great case for it. Like down in Palm Beach County, it's a big thing, the turtles.
Yeah.
And they this incredible thing. They get up at 5 in the morning and go down and protect the places where the turtles bury the eggs, and it's the only place where they do it and whatever. And the loggerheads but I mean, it's just such a big. But if you get into it, all of a sudden you're up at 5 in the morning, going down to the beach, walking up and down, or you're working with the people that are doing that. But it's just no into it.
Right.
And you do have to pick the ones. You did make a great point about well, they're all great points.
I hope I made one in there somewhere. I don't know. We've been on for a long time. Something's got to be decent.
Either me or you, one of us.
One of us said something brilliant, I'm sure.
Let's just hope there's one in there. But the thing about not just survive, but thrive, what that is really needs to be behind the thinking, because survive is to be average. That's making a living. And really, if you get yourself to just survive, you're really selling. The problem with that is you're selling yourself short, because in almost every person out there, there's some place they can, like you say, go pro or thrive. We're all created with certain skills, but we need to be proactive really in all areas of our life. Like if you got a doctor, like you mentioned it with a therapist, if you got a therapist, it's not clicking. It's not up to the therapist to tell you go find another therapist. It's up to you to say, this is not working for me. I got to move on. If you go through a doctor and, it's just not clicking, it's just like somehow they're not listening, or you're in a hospital. If you're in a hospital or you have a relative in a hospital and they come in and they don't pay any attention, get that family member out of there into another hospital. Be proactive in life to go for the best. Don't hold back and be timid about going. When you got something inside your gut that tells you there's something better, this can be better, this needs to be better, speak up, go. Be proactive in life. And the people that are high achievers are people that respond to that inner instinct or drive. And that's what I see inside of you. You're not going to just sit there and let yourself be pushed around and get, secondhand and do Shaquille's laundry for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I think you have to advocate for yourself. And then
Yeah.
you mentioned hospitals, it made me think of patient advocate. So my mom was in the hospital. She had a fall. She's 90. And I had to fight for her. If you said your goodbyes, I was like, no, we have not said our goodbyes.
Right.
This is a picture.
Yeah.
This is a picture of us having wine at the Biltmore 6 months ago. She's not ready for goodbye yet. But you have to advocate for your people in a hospital. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to go, hey, this isn't right. This isn't enough. I want more. And part of that, advocating for yourself goes back to knowing what you want, or being willing to accept that wherever you are right now isn't enough. Now, I do think for some people, they do get to a point where this is it. I'm doing what I want to be doing. I'm living this life. This is enough for me. So you have to decide what your enough is. Some people want a very simple life. They need the stability and the simplicity that's their definition of success. Fantastic. Mine, I'm wired a little weird. I always got to level up and find some new adventure. And every X number of years, I want to jump into something new. That's just who I am. I think life is an adventure that way.
And now you appear to be really excited about your workshop.
I am. So I'm a keynote speaker. Right? So I've gotten that piece of my business going. And I really enjoy corporate speaking. I like doing executive offsites where you get 50 or so people. That's my favorite. But big audience, a big stage, also a lot of fun. I got that piece down. And then people would come up to me afterwards and go, can I work with you one-on-one? And I don't have it in me to do that. Plus, in the space that I'm in, I'm not sure. I feel like they need probably a therapist or other things. I don't feel like I'm qualified. Right. But I started this Now What workshop because it's just me being me, and I can just get you through to the other side of whatever you're dealing with. And I know I can do that. And it's been really a fun thing to put together. And I found people smarter than me who have done workshops before to talk to me about what technology to use, how long these things should be, where to put worksheets, how often to put it out there. And people who are really good at that have helped me put this thing together. So I'm very excited about putting it out into the world. And it's going to be at a low price point. Everybody can jump in. I just want to be able to help people in
how do they find
a more meaningful way.
How do they find it?
It's nowwhatworkshop.com. And it's people always go, now what? I just got divorced. Now what? I just got fired. Now what? Whatever your now what is. Yeah. So it's nowwhatworkshop.com.
Nowwhatworkshop.com. Now, what is, we're going to wrap this up, but I am curious, when you speak to keynotes, what do you focus on versus, say, the individual smaller group, 50 or, the workshop, 50 or 60 people offsite? What do you find yourself as your main point, the difference in how you approach those things?
Well, I speak on resilience. That's what my research is all around, resilience, your ability to adapt in a positive way to whatever happens in your life. So the adapt piece. When I'm speaking on a big stage to a big group, I really focus on the change piece, why our brains don't like change, how hard change is. Yet the world is changing around us. Your industry is changing. We all got to deal with change. So that piece of it is what I focus on for a big group. In a smaller group, and I'll make the whole room really uncomfortable with change and then get them excited about them thinking about it. For a big group. For a smaller group, I can really get to know their specific challenges. So I like that smaller space where I can say, okay, I know this group, this company. I'll do a lot of stuff in the tech space and some financial tech space, so I can really understand what their specific challenges are and speak to those challenges and let them see the challenges and the changes in their industry in a new way. And I like working with that size because I can ask questions and get feedback. I can pose a question and actually give it a minute for them to think. When you're on a big stage and doing a big keynote with a big audience,
Right.
it's a little more performative. It's
Yeah.
edutainment. I've
Right.
got videos that play and stuff that
Yeah.
happens, and it's a little more edutainment. When I'm in a smaller keynote for an offsite or a workshop, or a company hires me to bring in something to do with change management, that's really an opportunity for me to get to know that company a little better. I spend a little more time in that space, to really understand them, and a few individuals in there who I can tap into. It's just a different vibe. And I can see their responses, and I can see their faces, and I can see that it's working. When you have a big stage, sometimes the lights are bright and you can't really tell if people are laughing at your jokes. I think I'm hilarious, but not always do they. I can't tell if they're laughing at my jokes. So it's just a different vibe. I enjoy both of them.
The thing about the value of what you're doing, especially in the big group, is that, I've heard it's like this thing, we're on a spinning planet, we're in a, you go through all the things, we're the little dot, we're only going to live so period of time. Like, what are you so rigid about,
Yeah. I actually use, speaking of spinning, I use the analogy I use in my big keynotes
Yeah.
is, do you remember you'll remember this because you and I were in this era. Do you remember the old merry-go-rounds, the metal ones and the playground when you were a kid, and it gets spinning, you jump on it, kind of like burn the back of your legs because it would be so hot. Yeah. And you'd hold on like for dear life.
Right.
And some kid would like stomp on your fingers, and everybody would sling off. The one bully would be left. Everybody would sling off.
Yeah.
And then you land in actual dirt back then too. So you sling off this metal thing into dirt, and then it would slow down, right? And then what did you do?
Yeah.
What happened when then it would slow down? What would you do?
Right. Slow down.
The whole thing slows down. All the kids wait, and then what do we do?
Get back going again.
We jump back on and win again.
Yeah. Get back going again.
That's what success is like. That's what being a high achiever is like. Yeah. You just get thrown off. You keep jumping on. We're just gluttons for punishment. But if you get a room full of a lot of people.
You never stop. Yeah, you never stop. No,
or the technology changes, or we have this global connectivity, and we never get to stop, really. So that idea of we just keep jumping back on no matter how many times we get thrown off this thing.
Well, I'm going to assume you still have one last word to pass on to our listeners. And I always give my guests the last word. And thank you so much. It's been really enjoyable. You've been very generous with your time. And I've enjoyed stomping on you and interrupting your conversations.
Not at all, Larry. It's a pleasure to get to know you and to be here. Thank you for having me. My final thought is in that the concept around it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay this way. If you are listening and you are in a tough chapter, if you're in a tough space right now, or something horrible's happened and you're trying to get through it, if you're just in a tough chapter of your life, it is just a chapter of your life. It is not your whole story. Don't let it be.
What a great final thought. Thanks so much. I look forward to getting you on again down the road and hearing about the workshops.
Excellent. Thanks.
And the new things that come after that. So thanks so much.
Thank you. I interrupted you there again. Thank you so much, Larry, for having me. It has absolutely been a pleasure.
All right. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to the final part of this episode of the Million Dollar Mastermind podcast. Great ideas don't care who uses them. If you're motivated to move up in a big way, right now, I've created a free training video to remove the mystery on how to set yourself up for big success. This is the information that has changed so many of our lives, and it can have the same impact on you, and the video is completely free. You'll find it at WeidelOnWinning.com. Join us over there, and thanks for being part of our community.